It's a rainy, nasty day out here at the Big Lake, and today we're talking about subtle ways you can improve your presentation to make it more enticing to those bass. Stick around. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you have to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing, and today we're talking about subtle ways you can enhance or change the presentation of your baits in order to make them more enticing for the bass. Now, as the pre-spawn approaches, the fishing pressure on the lakes is going to go way, way up. We all know this. During the winter months, well, the pressure has gone way down, and there are times I've even had the lake all to myself. Those days are over. Every time, even on a day like today, when I've come out, there have been plenty of boats at the ramp. The pre-spawn is in full swing. Those bass are starting to feed up, and everybody knows it. So, off the bat, we've started the year with the lake under pressure. So what can we do? How can we have our baits stand out? How can we counteract that pressure and make it so that the bass are still striking our lures? Well, there are several very easy ways that we can do this. Well, first and foremost is we can throw variations of the same baits that have been productive for us, baits that are still catching fish. Well, if everybody is throwing that bait, or the fish have seen you throw that bait and they recognize it over and over and over again, it may become time to change things up, even if they're still productive. For example, if you're throwing a regular sized jerk bait, suspending, floating, sinking, or whatever, consider downsizing it a little bit. Maybe even if that bait is still productive, maybe if it's still catching you fish, but you don't want the fish to become wary of it. You don't want them to become used to it. So in those instances, I'll tie on something like this little guy. This is a Googan Scout Junior or Junior Scout. It's a 2-hook variety jerk bait, and these still work very good for me. It's a translucent color, and it's not really especially something I would be throwing under these conditions. Under these conditions, I would be throwing something a little bit more solid, a little bit more flash, a little bit darker. But on a clear day, on calmer days, whenever you have more sun, more visibility, then this can work exceptionally well. And it keeps those bass guessing. That's the key. That's what we want to ensure. You get to a point where it doesn't really matter what color stick bait you're throwing. The bass have seen so many stick baits dragged in front of them that they know what they are. They just ignore them. So changing the color really isn't going to do anything because the presentation is essentially the same. What can we do? Well, we can alter how we retrieve it. Instead of giving it a straight drag, maybe give it a couple of hops here and there. Make it look slightly different. Don't give those bass something to key off on, something for them to recognize that it's a bait, an artificial presentation. Keep changing it up and keep making it fresh. Another way is, rather than going with the standard Texas rig, well, we can adjust and go to something like this guy here. I'm sure you guys remember this from a video I did over the summer about the Baby Carolina, the Carolina Light. It's an amalgamation between a Carolina rig and a Texas rig, and it works exceptionally well from the bank. I'll link that video in the description below, and after you're done watching this one, you can go check that one out. And right now, during the pre-spawn, the Baby Carolina, Carolina Light, does exceptionally well, especially for me with a lighter wire hook and a floating worm. That bait gets up off of the bottom just a little bit, and I'm able to attract those fish, which may be suspending a little bit, maybe a little bit more finicky. Remember, in this water here, that's a little bit more shallow. I'm not fishing anything more than 7 or 8 feet deep. Suspending bass for me is a little bit different than it would be for somebody who's fishing 25, 30 feet of water. Also, somebody who's fishing from the bank in 4 or 5 feet of water. So to take that into account, just adjust your leader length and you should be good.
I said just let it soak, let it sink, let it soak, let it do its thing. Then you can come along and, let's say, just give it a little bit of a drag. We're not trying to yank it along. We're just kind of easing it along. I want to feel that bottom composition. Very much to like how I would do something like a football jig. Or again, something like how I would do a Carolina rig. Just drag it along, nice and easy. There we go, I'm on. Ooh, that's a good one too. Come on. Oh yeah, he went after it. Get up here, you. Well, he got my worm. Oops. I got him right in the top of the mouth, just like you like, but he got my worm. But there you go, that is the mini, there we go, oops, and I hooked him again. That is the mini or baby Carolina rig. You can see how successful that fish was. Let me make sure I'm actually, there we go. You can see how successful that fish was. He hit it pretty good. He hit it with some gusto. He hit it with some oomph. And you just work it like a regular Carolina rig. This fish is probably just shy of 1 pound, probably about 3/4 pound. But beautiful fish, works great, didn't take long to get it.
So that's one example of a variation. We're not doing anything outlandish, but it's giving a presentation those fish are not familiar with. It's presenting something that they've actually seen before in a different way, so they actually still key off on it, and they will still strike it, and the fish are still attracted to it. It's a way of mixing things up. It's a way of giving those fish something different to key off on. So that's another way, working with a lipless crankbait. Instead of using the same 1/2 ounce or 5/8 ounce, maybe switch it up and go with a 1/4 ounce. Maybe go with a different brand. If you're using a rattle trap, a Bill Lewis rattle trap, which is a great brand, maybe switch it up to a Cotton Cordell Super Spot. They're very similar. The actions are very similar. And it's going to give those bass something different to key off on. Sometimes we don't have to do super radical changes. Sometimes it's as this rain, you can hear the rain. You can hear the rain on this metal roof, and it's getting harder for me to talk, but here we go. But sometimes it's those simple changes. Sometimes it's the little things that keep those bass interested. We can be throwing a great jig that's worked for us before in the same spot, under these same conditions, under these same patterns, and the fish, 1 or 2 bite it, and the rest leave it alone. So we have to figure out what it is that they want and why they want it that way. So understanding bass behaviors and bass patterns, that's key. You're not going to get away from that. If you want to be an effective bass angler, you're going to have to understand bass patterns and bass behaviors. Like the old bass professor Doug Hannon used to tell us, you have to understand why those bass react the way that they react. And that man had over 1,000 10-pound bass to his credit, and nobody else has done that. So I think he was onto something. I think he knew just a little bit of what he was talking about. You know, some of the things that we also look for whenever we're out fishing, and we know the fishing's going to be good. We know the pre-spawn is here. We know the bass are biting, and we get out and we get to our favorite spot and nothing. Well, change up spots. We want to fish patterns anyway. Don't fish spots, fish patterns. We know that those bass are migrating, so try to figure out their migration routes. Look for places that they're going to be holed up on so you can predict where they're going to be. You don't have to guess. You can learn how to predict. You're looking for a chunk of concrete that's sticking out of the mud along the bank, or maybe a post that's laying under the water, or in my case, a beat up old umbrella. And I've told this story before. I was fishing out of the bass bucket a couple years ago, and my son and I, we would pull up to this point and we would just catch one or two fish off of this same exact spot. And my electronics, they showed that it looked like a bush or a laydown. That's what we thought it was. Well, when the lake got to be on drawdown and the water got pulled back, we noticed it was a rusty old umbrella. And it was reliable. It was a place we could always catch fish because it was a place that was along the bass migration route. It was a place that they could stop, do what they needed to do their bass thing, and then move on. It's just like that post at the Little Lake. You guys remember this post, right? I always catch a fish off of that post. There's a laydown tree right next to it, and there's something about that area that the bass migrate to. It repopulates. And you guys remember my uncle catching that 8-pound monster off of that same post. Now, why does that post attract bass? Because it stands out. You've got a whole line of brush behind it. You've got laydowns that are all around it, but that post sticking up is different. It gives the bass something to key on. So again, that's something else, a subtle change. It doesn't have to be a huge change. In fact, most of the time, a huge change is going to be very off-putting to those bass. So you have to remember subtle changes in your presentation and subtle changes in the bass's surroundings. Those are the things that we're looking for, and those will put us on those high percentage spots and lead us to bigger and better catches.